All right, big people sermon time. Let's start off. As you guys know, I like to kind of start off by making sure everybody's like stretched and ready for worship. So just real fast, just stretch up, take a deep breath in. Oh, it feels good. It's Sunday morning. Stretch out. Try not to knock your neighbor unconscious. All right, roll your neck around. I know, yes. Oh, the percussion. Beautiful. All right, so one more deep breath in. Close your eyes. And exhale out. So we're going to start off today pretty easy. I want you to raise your hand if you showed up this morning. Good, you all passed. That was the easy question. Now, real question is, which one of you showed up this morning? Which Mary, which Sylvia, which Woody? The true self or the trickster? The holy or the hypocrite? The authentic or the actor sitting here today? Or zooming in from I don't know where? Regardless, my prayer is that it is the authentic us that will walk back out into the world in 30 minutes or so. See, our authentic self is who we are thanks to our divine indwelling, the oneness of the universe within. After all, we, the created, are at our purest essence tabernacles and trophies of the Creator. God, Allah, Zeus, Krishna, or the like. I'll leave the naming of the numinous up to each one of you because any epithet that we could pronounce would fall short of expressing the fullness of the one true spirit that we encompass. So let's turn back to ourself for this Sunday and continue on our month-long theme of courage by bravely exploring and accepting our own authentic being, regardless of whatever deity we delineate. Why isn't my page turning? There we go. The confusion starts at conception, as theologian and author of one of my favorite books, The Courage to Be, suggests. That is when our eternal self merges with our earthly self, and our identity crisis commences. The journey lies in uniting the two in our life thereafter. Balancing human and divine, though, that's not a simple task. And for that reason, few ever seriously take the time to explore, understand, and accept their divine identity. Instead, it's easier to live into this more superficial or socially imposed shell. In such, humanity often develops a self-hating reasons to deny the divine within, because we don't understand it, or we don't feel worthy of claiming it. I'm not attractive enough to be angelic. I'm not wise enough to identify with that of whom I worship. I'm not honest enough to be holy, etc., etc., etc. This tension between identities is the root of very much angst and anxiety in the soul of the existentialist, your average Unitarian Universalist. For neurosis, satirizes Tillich, is humankind's avoidance of non-being by avoiding being. Our false self, smaller self, or as some might call it, our sociological self, is an identity characterized by separation. From one another, yes, but moreover, a detachment from the divine. And as our digitalized society becomes increasingly isolated, spiritual separation is also becoming more prominent than ever. Ancient Abrahamic traditions refer to this state of disconnect as sin. That's a weighty and often misunderstood term in modern religious, or maybe should I say, religion-rebelling culture. We wouldn't know anything about that here. However, in this morning's context, we are not talking about sinning, but being in a state of sin or separation, and that carries no context of condemnation. When separated from our authentic being, we fall into a state of purposeless and loneliness. So no, sin, not fiery eternity alongside horned heathens dancing and prancing in red spandex. We'll save that for the 31st. But instead, a cold place of confusion. Losing sight of our true self means that we have strayed from our authentic values and in such allowed our earthly identity to overshadow our eternal authenticity, thus living in a state of separation from our source. This separation is opposed to the Buddhist principle of no self, or Atman, and occurs when one strays from any of the faith's 5 aggregates of existence: form, sensation, perception, cognition, and consciousness. Now, given that we're sitting here in a Santa Cruz sanctuary and not a Buddhist stupa, we might turn to the Western psychological parallel to this state of no-selfness, and that is that of ego. Now, there are 6 false or divisive beliefs that constitute ego, wrote Wayne Dyer shortly before his passing, and each distances us from our authentic being. The first of which is, I am what I possess. My clothes, the car I've got parked out there, any number of things. The second, I am what I do or accomplish. Third, I am my reputation. Maybe the letters before or after my name. And then we go into the separation. Fourth, I am separated from people. Fifth, I am separated from my desire, my purpose, my passion. And sixth and final, I am separate from my source. In other words, I have become separated from my authentic self. And when separated from our source, our passions and our desires, we turn towards superficial or addictive ways to temporarily fill the emptiness and gain acceptance from others instead. We shrink. The smaller false self is who we think society wants us to be. It is our identity influenced by culture or class or appearance or trends or industry, gender, clothes, and money. And we know it is false because in order to achieve it, it requires that we change ourselves to fit the mold. Flashback with me to a cross-country flight I took this past January. So what do? I'm a minister, I responded, wondering why the headphones I was wearing did not send the message I was shooting for. Ha! No, you're not. The skeptic sitting way too close on an overcrowded commercial aircraft argued. Break here for a moment to highlight the means of which we humans like to introduce and identify ourselves. What do? What a greeting. The second separation on the list of egotistical false truths. I am what I do. Okay, back. Okay then, I paused. In my head I'm thinking, I could have sworn I was a minister. Oh man. So I was thinking this to myself as I looked over at my neighbor who's continuously studying me amidst his second baby bottle of cheap airline vodka, of which I proceeded to order 3. I wish I would have met this man a little earlier, honestly, in life, for as it turns out, I wasted a good 10 years of life falsely living into a ministerial identity. Skipping out on seminary would have saved me a whole lot of time, money, and stress. Needless to say, curiosity quickly overcame contemplation, and I dove back into dialogue with this man, excited to figure out who it was I was. So, if I'm not a minister, who am I? The man looked confident at me. He goes, "You're the artist type. I'm a musician." Now, y'all have heard my pathetic attempt at the guitar several times by now. I apologize for that. And we won't even touch on the voice that accompanies it. So we all agree, musician I am not. However, I had a couple hours next to this man to consider. And though I usually enjoy a good conversation with a new friend on an airplane, on this day I was really just in the mood to turn on a movie and zone out while floating eastwardly across the country. You're right, you got me. I'm a musician, a writer, and I work in a coffee shop. I knew it, he said with unquestioning acceptance. What do you like to write? Sermons, I thought. But again, I wanted to avoid any unnecessary conversations that would come from trying to be witty, so I let the lie that was my Friday flight continue on. Comedies, I smiled. And for now, I have to get back to the one I'm currently working on. At the time, I didn't have the courage to claim my identity, the courage to be me. I blamed it on not having the energy, but the reality was, upon being questioned by that man, my first response was to question myself. Am I a minister? Am I faithful enough? Honest enough? Hell, in the past I've joked from this pulpit that I wake up atheist several times a week. I just really hope it doesn't happen on a Sunday morning. Of course, y'all would still welcome me. The Presbyterians would give me the boot. For those visitors, I'm actually a Presbyterian minister. Yeah, so maybe I should just turn to coffee and comedy if I want to claim my true identity. This little life episode had popped back into my consciousness while procrastinating on writing today's sermon the other night. You see, I'd gone through all my normal writing rituals, like candles lit, music on, computer charged, dinner done, tea poured, dog fed, but upon opening up my laptop to research world religious views on identity, I drifted instead into a beautiful Fijian daydream. It all started Monday upon getting an email from the National Presbyterian Church that I was approved for a sabbatical, of which I'd never notably applied for. Now, I'm not one to turn down a free vacation, but needless to say, I hadn't ever thought about taking a sabbatical like most ministers do because, well, like I alluded, I've never truly been able to accept myself as a minister. I don't have a church. I have several. And the one I'm most passionate about is floating in the Santa Cruz Harbor. I don't sport a tailored suit for worship. I wear a wetsuit for sport and worship while playing in the waves. I didn't go to seminary in order to figure out how to be a better Christian, but to better equip myself to challenge Christianity. I don't have a desire to convert people who don't share my beliefs. I like to converse with people who have alternative wisdom to share. I don't hold office hours because, well, I don't have an office. So, no, I never considered myself eligible for a minister's sabbatical because, well, my ministerial identity is often a little too radical. But radical is a revelatory word in religion, the foundation for reformation as well as rejection. And the two often go hand in hand. It was for speaking of radicalism that Teresa of Lisieux, who can say that better? Teresa of... I had it down earlier and I can't pronounce it now. We'll go with Lisieux. A French Carmelite nun who received next to no formal education throughout her hidden life of only 24 years. She was declared a doctrine of the church in 1997 in response to her radical notion of democratizing holiness, or assuring that holiness is within anyone willing to share the divine love and acceptance. These radical concepts of love and acceptance were later deemed radical grace, and rooted in a concept of perfectionism. Not perfect in the sense of being pretty and polished, but in embracing our perfectly authentic, perfectly true identity. Perfection seems simple to me, Teresa writes. I see it as recognizing and embracing one's nothingness and abandoning one's self, one's ego, so that we can be a child in God's arms. Spiritually rooted, perfection is thus found through our ability to include, forgive, and accept what the world often understands to be imperfection. But accepting our perceived imperfection is hard, and it takes courage. It requires us to forgo the notion that the world, nor we as inhabitants of it, are not as we should be. Walk around the streets this week trying just that. Accepting and loving things for what they are, not what we think they should be, or what they could be, or what they do for us, simply for what Franciscan philosopher Duns Scotus claimed, their thisness. The doctrine of loving things in and of themselves, for what they are, not for what they do for us. That's when we really begin to love. Our neighbors, the homeless man on the street, the obnoxious teen driving by in a car without a muffler, the guy that cut us off on the way to work, the flower in the field, the star in the sky, the seagull who pooped on us from the same sky, and the person that we met this morning in the mirror when we awoke. When we free the world from our agendas, we can truly love the world without concern for what it does for us. We begin to love others in themselves and for themselves, and ourselves in and for ourselves as living images of one universal spirit. This requires something I like to refer to as a second gaze, that of compassion, not defensiveness. Our first gaze is often rich with embedded or intrinsic bias or judgment. We're human. That's what we do. Don't hate yourself for it. This first gaze is that of the first self, or the false self. For the false self is often first to speak up, because it's always looking outward, whereas the authentic self is busy looking inward. But as Carl Jung declares, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. This second gaze is a courageous role reversal. It's an opportunity for the authentic self to take the lead, a chance to gaze into the divine nature of every element, creature, condition, etc. And in opposition to the reactionary quality of a first gaze, or false gaze, that uses one's ego eye, the second gaze is responsive. And the most prevalent response to a second gaze is love, awe, and acceptance. People travel to wander the height of the mountains, gaze at the huge waves of the sea and the long courses of rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, wrote St. Augustine. Yet they pass by themselves without wondering. Thus, the hard, courageous part comes when we reach the mirror. Today's reading was from the children's literature series by Chris Colfer, Said It Well. In the last work of his series, The Worlds Collide, Colfer's characters are on a quest for wisdom, while two worlds, a fairy tale world and a real world, are on an inevitable collision course. You can restore all the bottled youth, beauty, and stamina to their rightful owners, the frogman explained, knowing that the time is limited and perception varies from reality to fairy tale. True, it won't change how you look, but it will change how you look at yourself. There it is, second gaze. The restoration of authenticity won't change your physical appearance. An egotistical eye's vision will not be corrupted. However, from that point on, as the frogman continues, every time you pass a mirror and see your reflection, you won't see a hideous monster. You'll see a woman or a man whose choice to help others instead of helping themselves. And anyone who looks into a mirror and sees who they are, their authentic self, over what they are, their false self, well, it's impossible to curse somebody like that. And so we've reached the climax of today's sermon, the courage to be. And Paul Tillich's work can be pretty easily summarized, despite the big, scary theological words and concepts that line its page. The courage to be starts by eliminating any of our egotistical identity marks. What we possess, what we do or don't have, what we have done, the business of our schedule, the letters preceding or following our name, our friendship list on Facebook, etc., etc., etc. Then, and only then, boldly loving the bejesus out of the authentic being that is left when everything else is stripped away. Think of all the things that define you. Take just 1 second. All the things that you're proud of, the goals that you have. There's a lot of talent in this room. I hope you guys' minds are just going crazy, because I can sense it all. Anybody want to spout out something that makes them special?
Singing.
Parent. Healing.
Healing.
Backhand. Teacher.
Well, guess what? None of these things make you special. My reverend title doesn't make me special. Music doesn't make Carol special. Singing doesn't make Woody special. Writing, teaching, the list goes on. None of these things makes us special. Instead, it is us who makes these things special. It is in our authenticity and participating in something that transcends the self, that transcends us, that makes the world truly special and unites the eternal with the earthly, the fairy tale with the nonfiction, and the holy with our slightly humorous humanity. So go do something courageous as you re-enter the world today. Be. Not be brave, but bravely be. Amen.